I would like to request all the participants to mute their mics to avoid disturbances. Good morning to everyone present here. On the occasion of International Day of Persons with Disabilities, the GNLU Center for Disability Studies is glad to organize this online session on the theme of consumerism and disabilities. The aim of this session is to discuss the consumer rights of the persons with disabilities and their inclusion as a customer in the market. International Day of Persons would to mute their mic. Okay, sir. The aim of the session is to discuss the consumer rights of the persons with disabilities and their inclusion as a customer in the market. International Day of Persons with Disabilities is a UN Day that is celebrated every year on 3rd December. The day is about promoting the rights and well-being of the persons with disabilities at every level of society and development, and to raise awareness of the situation of persons with disabilities in all aspects of political, social, economic, and cultural life. I would like to introduce the GNLU Center for Disability Studies. The center is an extension of GNLU Committee for Persons. The center is an extension of GNLU Committee for Persons with Disabilities. It was established in 2019. The center is an extension of GNLU Committee for Persons with Disabilities. It was established in 2019 with an aim to work for disability rights and social justice through promotion of teaching and research in the interdisciplinary areas of sociology, social work, law, and policy. Through curriculum development, research projects, and disability studies, the center attempts to meaningfully contribute in the areas of disability and human rights, disability and society, accessibility and reasonable accommodations, inclusive education, gender, and disability, amongst others. The center intends to create an environment ensuring mainstreaming and equal participation of students with disabilities in the university. The center brings together academicians, researchers, scholars, lawyers, practitioners, activists, students, and other stakeholders to foster dialogue on the increasing relevance of disability studies and research. I take immense pleasure in welcoming the distinguished speakers of today's webinar. Professor Dr. Maheshwar Singh, Professor of Political Science, National Law University, Delhi. Advocate Ms. Kanchan Pamnani, Advocate and Solicitor, High Court of Bombay. Mr. Amar Jain, Advocate and Certified Professional in Web Accessibility, and Mr. Vaibhav Kothari, Founder and CEO, Omvai, You Belong. I would now like to request Dr. A. Marispo, Head of the GNLU Center for Disability Studies, to deliver the welcome address.
Thank you, Samita. I welcome everyone for this auspicious occasion and great webinar. I welcome all the speakers, Amar Jain sir, Vaibhav Kothari sir, and Kanchan Pamnani ma'am, and especially Maheshwar Singh sir. Here, why we have chosen this topic? What's the reason behind that, and how we should actually introspect with regard to consumerism and disabilities? Today, everywhere we could see one or the other discourse on disabilities rights, but most of the times they may talk about reservation, they may talk about something related to their livelihood in terms of either charity, in some terms of social model. However, this consumer rights and consumerism in terms of disability are somehow neglected. I feel that being a criminology teacher, sometimes disability, they themselves normalize this kind of neglect. That's where I thought of critiquing that one. Even Maheshwar sir also have that notion. Even Amar Jain sir also having that activism role. So that's where we should question that normality. Why should we accept it? And sometimes some scholars say that, okay, if able people also struggling, even why should we also further proceed into this kind of discourse? Why we should think about getting certain things on consumers? So that's way a kind of a dilemma consumers are having, especially that is known as relative acceptability in terms of neutralization. So these two ways disability they themselves ignore, though we have various rights on consumers: right to be heard, right to be informed, right to safety, and right to redress. However, with regard to consumer with disabilities, the first and foremost, access and availability of suitable consumer market. And Vaibhav sir actually, as a business entrepreneur, he himself tell how the market actually behave with regard to disabled consumer as well as seller. So that's the reason. In fact, one small incident I would like to highlight here, how that consumerism is ignored, rather a kind of problematic for the persons with disabilities. When I was walking with one of my friend who is a totally blind, right? I'm a partial blind. Now, when we were going to the shop, I thought of having a puff. Then that person taken to me a shop, and he asked a person to give puff. That person actually given a samosa. He all told this person, this is samosa, this is a puff, that samosa's puff, and he always offer 5 rupees. That generally we know there is a difference between puff and samosa. But see, being the blind, this person has been deceived by the seller. He actually sold samosa as puff. He told that price is comparatively less. It's not about price. What about the product? Similarly, one incident I also come across from one of my friend with regard to purchase of soap and toothpaste. They have been asking a particular toothpaste because that person has the knowledge and awareness about the product, and he has given the details. I'm just telling that product is Sensodyne. Yes, there are Sensodyne. We have various varieties, but the vendor has given normal Sensodyne. So even he has the awareness, but he couldn't purchase. Similarly, soap. You have like various products, but particular even Dettol various products, but he couldn't get actual. And then what happened? Sometimes, if they are facilitating the consumers, they are getting extra charges. अरे आपको मदद किया है? Or sometimes what happened? They may not give proper changes. So these things happens. But we actually what happened? We as a consumer, be it relative acceptability or be it claim of normality, we often ignore. Keep that in mind. And this time even has a motto about technology inclusivity, right? So we actually thought of having that aspect in the consumer rights perspective, and as a disabled consumer, how I can enlarge or how I can expand my awareness and my access and my activism through this technology. So keep these thoughts in mind. We have organized this webinar and we have eminent speakers with us, Maheshwar Singh sir, and he has that lot of academic experience in the disability studies field. And we have Amarjeen sir and Kancham Pamnani ma'am, who are actively involving in getting this consumer rights. And especially Amarjeen sir is right now moving towards that accessible online platform. Even Kancham ma'am actually focusing on that availability of service sectors to the consumer with disabilities. In fact, one information I would like to highlight, Kancham ma'am actually played a role in getting that guidelines, inclusive, disability inclusive, inclusivity in the banking sectors. That 2009 onwards, she is working on that. So we would like to hear from that. Then we will proceed question answer if we have anything. Right? And I welcome all the participants who have shown the interest and who would like to be an activists in that disabled consumer era, and who will carry forward whatever the discourse we have today. And I welcome one and all to this particular webinar, and I wish each and every person with disability a happy Disability Day, and let us cherish this disability. Thank you. Over to you, Shamita.
Thank you so much, sir. Our very first speaker for the day is Professor Dr. Maheshwar Singh, Professor of Political Science, National Law University, Delhi. Dr. Maheshwar Singh is a professor of political science at the National Law University, Delhi. He has been teaching political science and international relations for nearly 2 decades. He has been with NLU Delhi since 2009. He holds a doctoral degree in diplomacy and international security from Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Professor Singh is also the director of Center for Studies in Disability and Law at the National Law University, Delhi. He has been a visiting professor at a number of universities in Europe. He has researched and published in the areas of water laws, disability laws, and policy and development-induced displacement. Professor Singh also works as a consultant to prominent institutions of the government. We are very happy to have you here, sir. Now I request Professor Dr. Maheshwar Singh to address the gathering on consumerism and consumer rights of the persons with disabilities.
Thank you for your kind words. Thank you, Dr. Maheshwar, for having me here as in the panel of speakers on the International Disability Day, which is 3rd of December. I would flag a number of issues, not specifically deal with the question of consumerism and its relationship with disability rights. While flagging the issues, the first question that I like to address to myself and to everyone present here, are disabled people consumers in the first place? All right. So if they are part of the market space, then we can call them consumers. All right. But if they're excluded by and large from the market space, then the first question that we need to establish, and the first question that we need to answer, whether we as people belonging to disabled category form part of the wider set of consumers. So this will be the focus of my conversation with the rest of you. I'll start with a story that dates back about 4 or 5 years ago. I was visiting one of the European capitals to address a workshop on disability. All right. And then as part of the entire process, I was taken to a famous monument. All right. And the monument had, certain kinds of fee to enter into the monument. So for able-bodied people, it was some, let's say, X amount. And then suddenly I saw an X amount was exorbitant. Then suddenly I saw for people with disability, it was half of that amount. So I went to the counter and said that, well, I belong to the category of people, I am person with disability. So am I eligible for discounted rate to enter the monument, discounted fare to enter the monument? And in a foreign land, I was surprised that the person said, oh, please, sir, do you have any card or anything? I said, I don't have any card, but you can come out of the window and, see for yourself if I belong to that category or not. Without even getting out of his window, getting out of his room, the person immediately gave me the ticket. So through the story, I'm making a broad point that in certain jurisdictions, the level of inclusivity is relatively much higher for people with disability than our jurisdiction. All right. And therefore, it is appropriate to talk about people with disability as consumers in those jurisdictions, as part of the market space in those jurisdictions, as party to any kind of transaction that takes place in those kinds of spaces. Now, let's talk very, very briefly about the spirit of International Disability Convention. Now, the spirit of International Disability Convention is promotion of equality and non-discrimination. And following, because we are signatory, we as country are signatory to International Disability Convention, so we have also sort of reenacted our old international disability law and the new disability law of the new disability law of 2016. All right. So both at the international level and national level, the emphasis is on two principles. One is equality, promotion of equality. Two is the non-discrimination. But everywhere else you go, people with disability, at least in our jurisdiction, face discrimination of attitudinal kind of attitudinal discrimination of one kind or the other. And of course, people with disability are not treated at par and equal in the space of citizenship with those of able-bodied individuals. All right. So day in and day out, it is being questioned, it is being violated, and so on and so forth. Now, I'll take up three important aspects of consumer rights. One is, over and over again, we have been reading in the newspapers that certain people who belong to the category of disabled category are stopped at the airport for one reason or the other, for security check. Sometimes the flight attendants don't allow people with disability to board the aircraft. And on other occasions, people with disability have deboarded from the flight. And we read it over and over again in the newspapers. What is the reason behind it? Why is people with able-bodied people are, when they satisfy other conditions, which include security and this, that, and the other, they are allowed to enter the aircraft, and why people with disability are discriminated against? One of the reasons is the world is, architecturally designed, and so is the case with planes and the airports, keeping in mind the needs of able-bodied people and not the needs of people with disabilities. So we are completely excluded from the consumer market, if ever there was a consumer market for people with disability. All right. Two is, even if some of us are able to access the consumer market, all right, then the attitudinal barriers of able-bodied people prevent us from accessing the benefits of the consumer market. And, boarding or deboarding from flight is one aspect of it. And this very broadly, very widely reported in the newspapers. All right. We all, after having number one, many able-bodied people just overlook those reports. Some of us who are concerned with disabled rights look at those reports and show our anxiety, but nothing is done in policy terms to end this discrimination and end this attitudinal barriers. I mean, as far as I am concerned, I have not come across something very concrete on part of the government or on part of the local authorities or on part of the disabled groups also to address such a situation of asymmetry between able-bodied people and people with disability. That is one aspect of it. Now, when we talk about consumer, largely we talk about consumer rights in our jurisdiction in urban spaces. All right. What is important for people with disability, for inclusivity, is to be able to access the public transport in urban spaces, to go from one place to other places. All right. I can only speak about Delhi. Despite the claims made by the government that low-floor buses are being procured by the government, the existence of public transport as metro, in form of metro, and other kinds of public transport, despite the fact that in theory, and also it's quite visible, that the seats for people with disability are being reserved in metro as well as in buses. How many people with disability are able to access those? Number one, the so-called low-floor buses, all right, are unable to sort of allow the entry of people with disability in those buses because the buses are very crowded. Imagine a situation, somebody is on a wheelchair, all right, would find it absolutely impossible to enter the crowded buses, all right. And secondly, even if she manages to enter the crowded bus, she will not be able to get to the location where the seats are reserved for people with disabilities. So for all practical purposes, following the International Disability Convention, following the law, following the local rules of government, the government in theory suggests that, well, we have reserved places for people with disability in public transport, but in reality, people with disability cannot access those spaces. Second important point is, insofar as consumer rights for people with disability is concerned, is the question of accessibility. I'll take a simple aspect of health. All right. Now, people who have locomotor disability of one kind or the other, or have the amputated limbs, every 1 year or 6 months, depending on the severity of their amputation, have to go and get a fresh prosthetic limb. Number one, the literature very clearly suggests the linkage between disability and poverty. All right. So many people with many people belonging to PWD category are not able to access the private clinic, who put an exorbitant rate for those prosthetic limbs. So then, what is the way out to access those limbs from government hospitals? Now, for one reason or the other, the government hospitals are so crowded that people with disability, especially those whose limbs are amputated, cannot access, all right, the prosthetic clinic if the need arises all of a sudden, or the prosthetic clinics are not able to address to the requirements of the clients on an immediate basis, on an urgent basis. So the point is that all the time we are talking about consumer rights for people with disability, but these are the crucial aspects of accessibility in which people with disability are being, for the lack of infrastructure, are being excluded from the market space. Third important point, insofar as accessibility question is concerned, is the question of accessibility to public buildings. I forget about private buildings. All right. Now, fortunately, Accessible India campaign has begun, and which is retrofitting the old buildings so that people with disability can access those buildings. But believe you me, some of these arrangements are themselves detrimental to the cause of accessibility, because the ramps are so steep that more often than not, people with disability cannot climb those ramps up and access the public buildings. I will cite you a research. This is the status of public buildings, but having said that, I have to admit that many public buildings, because of Accessible India campaign, have been made accessible for people with disability. Insofar as private buildings are concerned, now look at the construction imagination or architectural imagination of private builders. They never take the needs of people with disability into consideration while designing a private building, while designing a flat or a multi-story building. In one of the students who went to a very famous law school in Delhi, all right, came from a very privileged background, all right, came to intern with me at the Center for Studies in Disability in Law. So I told her, well, you don't do anything, forget about laws and other things. You just do a accessible audit of the building there where you live. And this is really a sort of top area in Delhi. And to her surprise and to my surprise, the accessibility audit, all right, was negative from the point of view of the consequence. The result of accessibility audit was in negative from the point of view of people with disability. One of the things that International Disability Convention and the disabled rights group across the world, have argued for and argue for very strongly, and I think there is a lot of substance in it, is nothing for us without us. Unfortunately, in decision-making process, all right, in large public bodies or smaller public bodies, the people with one kind of disability or the other are not included. So the decisions are being taken by able-bodied people imagining the world for themselves and not for people with disabilities. So we are excluded, marginalized, completely made invisible from the public space. Do we have consumer rights in that sense? I mean, that's the question that we need to address. Let me do a bit of number crunching. I don't believe in that, but number crunching in case of disability is important. Number crunching is important because 2011 census report, that's Government of India supposedly most authentic document insofar as head count is concerned. Says that 2.34% of the total population in the year 2011 belong to the category called people with disability. Now, assuming that in 2011, we were just 110 million people, 2.3% of that population, 2.34% of that population works out to be roughly about 47, 48 million people, which is the total population of, or just a little less than total population of the largest number of European countries. So we are talking about 47, 48 million people. Large number of those people are, for one reason or the other, all right, are not able to access the consumer market. What kind of consumer rights are we talking about? All right. The most important aspect, and with this, I will end my conversation on disability and consumer rights, is the question of education. If educational opportunities could be linked with accessibility question, and also to a certain extent the rights of people with disability to access those facilities. Now, it's very well established, despite the constitutional promises, despite the promises made in International Disability Convention, despite the promises made in 2016 Disability Act, all right? People with disability, insofar as educational rights are concerned, are barely visible in educational institutions. Forget about at the level of tertiary education, in the primary and at the secondary level, they are barely visible. And if they are able to get admission at primary and secondary level, the dropout rate is so much that by the time they get to we talk about tertiary level of education, I mean, we can count the number of people with disability who are on fingers, who are able to access the tertiary education, which is university education or higher education in this country. Why this dropout rate? Two reasons I can immediately, or three reasons I can immediately talk about. One is that, as I said a while ago, there is an established link between disability and poverty in literature. And I don't need to dwell upon this. Among the experts, they understand it very well, that people with disability are mostly not able to have the kind of surplus to finance their education, all right? And also, historically, culturally, people with disability are considered as a bad omen in the family, in the wider society, and therefore, nobody wants to see them early morning in the schools. Number three is, even if they are able to get to the school, all right, the attitudinal barriers are such that they feel discriminated by their colleagues and also by the teacher, all right? Number four is, to address these questions, there is the concept of reasonable accommodation. the idea of reasonable accommodation is being discussed, is being interpreted in International Disability Convention, which also finds space in our National Disability Law of 2016. So reasonable accommodation requires that teachers be trained to sympathetically and also sympathetically address the students with one kind of disability or the other, and mainstream them, not make a separate space for them, but mainstream them and provide them education or with other students in the class. In my own university, I have seen that is the status of and this is a educational institution which imparts the tertiary level of education, which is the legal education. All right. In my own university, I've seen we have a student in one of the classes with cognitive disability, which is learning disability. But she has found through her hard work and all of that some space in our university. Now we requested the teachers to have a simple set of a separate question paper for her, asking a simpler question so that she can understand. And some of my colleagues, refused to do that, which is shocking in itself. So I had to tell them that the concept of reasonable accommodation, all right, must be interpreted, must be given a positive interpretation, a beneficial interpretation to mainstream people with disability. So the point is that, a place as enlightened as National Law University, Delhi, is not able to address, not able to understand, not able to provide the beneficial interpretation of reasonable accommodation to a single student in order to mainstream people with disability, we can imagine the situation prevailing at the secondary and the primary level of education. Now, taking these points into consideration, I reach a very, very pessimistic conclusion that we are talking about consumer rights and consumerism and disability. I see the linkage, but how many people, how many of us, how many of people belonging to the disabled category are part of the market space? We are excluded from the market space for one reason or the other, all right? And therefore, we can still talk about consumer rights and its linkage with disability in theory, but in reality, there's very little to speak about insofar as consumer rights of people with disability is concerned. Having said that, I am really thankful to some of the colleagues who are cost lawyers and who have taken the question of the problems of disabled to the judicial system, at least able to provide them some access to justice, which remains a concern for people with disability because they cannot access the lawyers, much less the courts. And access to justice remains an important question to be squarely answered for people with disability. Having said all this, I think I'll stop here And at the end of it, I will tender my apology, saying that I will not be available for the rest of the session and Q&A because I have some other responsibilities to take care of in the university. And today is International Disability Day, so we have a program scheduled in the afternoon, and then I have my teaching responsibility. So I'm extremely sorry for not having present for the entire session. I think that's enough for now. Thank you.
So thank you so much for your insightful session.
Thank you so much, sir. Maheshwar, sir. Sir, we have a question if you would like to address.
Yeah, I can take the question if there are questions now.
Yes, sir. So we are live on YouTube and there's a question from there. Samyukta, go ahead, take the question.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Our audience have a question, which is, in public offices, there aren't separate restroom facilities for disabled persons. What's your take on the same, sir?
That's true. There is no separate space for people with disability in public offices. Forget about private offices. All right. My take is simple. What could be my take? My take is simple. Resting spaces should be created in all public spaces for people with disability. All right. I mean, when we talk about, having said this, may I add, which I did not mention in course of my conversation with you, how many of us, how many people with disability are part of the labor market in a formal or informal sense? All right. Some private companies have taken initiative in this regard, have included people with disability, but how many of us are part of labor market? And since we are so invisible in the labor market, all right, and not part of the mainstream labor force, so therefore, I cannot talk about the PW rights with regard to and related to consumerism in any substantive sense. Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking the question, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Maheshwar. My apologies to you for not having been, not being with you throughout the session, and I'm really sorry about it.
No, thank you, sir. We understand, sir. We know. We actually really thankful for your insightful thoughts, sir. And thanks a lot for your valuable time. And we will have you in another occasion, sir. Thank you. Thank you
very much.
Thank you.
So much.
Yes.
Okay. Bye.
Bye, sir.
Take care of yourself.
Yeah, yes.
And have a nice day.
Thank you, sir. Yeah. Samyukta, over to you.
Mary, sir, just give me 1 second, please.
Yes. Yes, sir.
Alert, leading left parent ISL interpreter right parent has left the meeting.
Yeah.
We can continue.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
Our
Concern,
next
ma'am?
speaker for today.
Just a minute. Concern, ma'am, are you able to hear us? Concern,
Sorry.
ma'am? Concern, ma'am. Just check it out whether.
Yes, sir. Ma'am is there.
Is it she's unmuted?
Yeah, she is muted.
Concern, ma'am, please unmute yourself. Okay. Just a minute. I'm just calling. Okay. Because okay. Meanwhile, you just go ahead.
Okay, sir.
Concern, ma'am, can you hear us? Yeah, go ahead.
Sir,
Okay,
you
sir.
would need to put your mic on mute, Marisport, sir.
Yeah, I will put, sir, but I just talking to concern ma'am whether she is able to hear us. Then I will unmute it, mute it myself.
Our next speaker is Ms. Kanchan Pangnani, advocate and solicitor, High Court of Bombay. She has over 2 decades of experience as a solicitor and advocate in Mumbai. She completed her graduation from Sydenham College and did her LLB from Government Law College.
I'm
Her
sorry, can you
core
please
work
repeat the
areas.
college, Samyukta? Can you please repeat the college?
Yes, it's Sydenham.
Sydenham College.
Can you spell it, please?
Sydenham.
Thank you.
Her core work areas are civil and commercial litigation, corporate and civil advisory, and disability rights litigation. Her clients include Indian multinationals, NRIs investing in India, Indian financial institutions, private and public trusts, high net worth individuals,
I'm sorry,
and NGOs.
Samyukta, can you please slow down when you're explaining these things? The interpreter, we need to understand.
Sorry, I will do it. Yeah, sorry. Her core work areas are civil and commercial litigation, corporate and civil advisory and disability rights litigation. Her clients include Indian multinationals, NRIs investing in India, Indian financial institutions, private and public trusts, high net worth individuals and NGOs working in the field of disability. She is a recipient of various awards, including National Award for the Empowerment of Persons with Disabilities by President of India for outstanding performance as role model, and Louis Braille Award by Shri C.U. Shah Pragya Chakshu Mahila Seva Kunj, Gujarat. We are glad to have you here, ma'am. Ma'am will be addressing on accessible services for the persons with disabilities. Over to you, ma'am.
Hi, Preeti. Are you ready now?
Harshit, just check it, what's mom's connection?
Sir, ma'am is there, but she's on mute, and I've asked her to unmute as well.
Okay, just call.
Yes, sir.
Just wait, hold on a minute. I will call. Okay.
Audio now unmuted.
Okay, can we go have next speaker then? Amar sir, are you there?
Yes, sir, I'm here. I think ma'am is also unmuted now because I could hear her jaws in between.
But yeah, but I couldn't. Kanchan ma'am, can you hear us, ma'am?
Amar sir, that's Mary sir's jaws.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But now Zoom has this issue, sir. Now whenever we join, automatically, earlier it was not the case, but now Zoom has this.
Got it, sir. I just want to check how good my audio is because my internet connection is very patchy.
Sir, very well audible.
Okay.
Mary sir, if we can start with Amar sir then.
Yes.
Samyukta, please introduce Amar
Yes,
sir,
sir.
and we can go ahead.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
We have Mr. Amar Jain, advocate and certified professional in web accessibility. Mr. Amar Jain is a qualified advocate and accessibility professional. He has worked with law firms on an exclusive retainership arrangement as a corporate lawyer. As part of his professional engagement, he has worked on the deals involving both Indian and international capital markets and banking and finance areas, respectively. He is a certified professional in web accessibility from International Association of Accessibility Professionals, an organization formed under the Global Initiative for Inclusive Information Communication Technology under United Nations. This certification helps him to provide consultancy and training on making websites and apps accessible for everyone, including persons with disabilities. Mr. Amar Jain is a recipient of NCPEDP Emphasis Javed Abidi Public Policy Award by National Center for Promotion of Employment of Persons with Disabilities and Emphasis Led Work Limited for his work in the area of public policy, and Sarojini Triloknath National Award for Best Role Model by National Association for the Blind, Delhi. Apart from his professional legal services to law firms, he is also working for empowerment of persons with disabilities. We're glad to have you here, sir. Sir will be addressing us on accessible goods and markets for the persons with disabilities. Over to you, sir.
Thank you and good morning, everyone. First of all, wishing everyone a very happy International Day of Persons with Disabilities. Well, my internet connection is patchy, so I'm joining through the audio. And in between, if you lose my audio, please give me a heads up so that I can repeat, or we can do the needful. So the topic today is accessible consumer goods and the consumer market broadly, right? We look at it legally. Persons with disability fall within the definition of consumers, right? So long as you complete the commercial transaction, so long there's a cause of action, there is a commercial transaction which involves a product or services, and you pay for it, you become the consumer. Now, the question is that whether there is any legal backing to say that all the consumer products and the markets have to be designed keeping accessibility in mind. So answer is like this. Accessibility has many areas, okay? Each sectoral regulator / ministry has to kind of come out with the regulations around what kind of accessibility they can provide with regard to the services that their sector offers. Let's take a couple of examples and then we'll talk through it to establish how persons with disabilities are part of the consumer market and what is the strategy to get things implemented. So for example, you talk of drinking water or the tap water or allied areas. So your Ministry of Jal Shakti, for example, is empowered to notify standards around accessibility. As a rule, we all must know that under the formation of Department of Persons with Empowerment for Persons with Disabilities under the allocation of business rules, which is the main allocation of business rules where the government ministries or departments are formed and the business of government is kind of laid down. It's fairly clearly established that the responsibility to formulate policies / programs will lie with the Department of Empowerment for Persons with Disabilities, but ensuring compliance for with the said programs / policies is with the respective ministries, and which is where you have the Rule 15 of Rights of Persons with Disabilities rules, which talks about the deadline for ensuring compliance with regard to the notified accessibility standards, read with section 40 and 46, okay, and 44, 45 with regard to physical accessibility. I don't want to talk too much about RPWD Act here because our focus is consumerism and consumer markets. I'll just say that from the RPWD Act perspective, we have non-discrimination as the main principle and reasonable accommodation as another principle that we are going to base our discussion for today. Okay. So we were at the examples of where consumer standards need to come in. So water, etc. I gave you one example. Tourism is another example where Ministry of Tourism needs to come out with guidelines as to how tourism industry can be made accessible. Department of Consumer Affairs regulates couple of aspects of various empowerments that the consumers are entitled to. One of which is your packaging standards, which is your legal metrology rules, right? So in terms of any goods or products and services packaging, how that can be made accessible, again, we need standards for that. Healthcare. So a lot of this is also falling. If you look at the law, the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act, the law only talks about public facilities and services, which Kanchan ma'am is going to talk about. So I'm not touching, and I know ma'am will have extremely valuable inputs to give us. So I'm not touching there. But in terms of products, in the RPWD Act, you have no definition, except the fact that you have definition of universal design, etc. But interestingly, in the Consumer Protection Act, if you look at it, there is a definition of product defect. And accordingly, the concept of product defect liability comes out. And non-compliance with any standards that are formulated or any law, that becomes one of the grounds on which you can establish a defective product, right? And you can claim for product liability. Same is the case with deficiency of services, but I'll restrict myself to the products aspect of it. So when we talk of goods, we also look at packaging standards, right? Healthcare. So these are some of the various examples where we need standards, first of all, as to what would constitute accessible services. A lot of what I spoke just now, various ministries have issued, in fact, draft standards. They are being kind of consulted and debated upon and discussed. We hope to see sooner or later Rights of Persons with Disabilities rules getting amended with a list of notifications issued by or the standards notified by various ministries for various services. So we do hope that that happens soon. For now, what is it that we have in terms of, if we talk about it from a consumer goods perspective? We only have one standard, which is of utmost important. Rest of it, of course, there are standards for physical buildings. There are standards for transport, only with regard to buses, but not other forms of transport. So I'm not touching on those aspects. There is only one comprehensive standard that we have right now, which is on ICT products and services. ICT, Information Communication Technology, products and services. Now, how do you look at information communication technology? The definition is given in Section 2N of Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act, which is basically inclusive of all forms of services / products that are based on information communication technology, including web services, virtual services, to name a few, right? So now, if we look at what could typically fall under this bucket, if you look at your microwave oven, if you look at your washing machine, if you look at your television, if you look at your air conditioner, if you look at your testing equipments like BP monitor, sugar monitor, right? There is ICT involved in some or the other way in every aspect of these products. To cater to this aspect of accessibility, Bureau of Indian Standards notified what is called as Indian Standard 17802, IS 17802, parts 1 and 2. Part 1 talks about what are the requirements to make ICT products accessible. Part 2 talks about what are the conformance requirements. Once you have made it accessible, how do you ensure their conformance, whether the requirements are adhered to or not, right? Part 1 deals with multiple aspects of ICT. It deals with softwares, it deals with hardwares, it deals with websites, it deals with documentation, it deals with emergency and relay services, it deals with support services, to name a few. It deals and it has overarching functional statements to ensure that wherever there are no standards, these are some criteria that you need to meet to be able to make them accessible. The standard has been notified by Bureau of Indian Standards. Part 1 was notified in December 2021, and Part 2 was notified in April 2022, right? But this needs to be notified by the Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disability as part of Rights of Persons with Disabilities rules under Rule 15, to be able for us to be able to call it an accessibility standard, because as per Section 40 of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act, central government needs to notify standards in relation to accessibility, right? That's when it becomes a notified accessibility standard. And the definition of notify/notification is as prescribed under the rules. So the Rights of Persons with Disability rules need to be amended to be able to call it an accessibility standard. The government did come up with a draft on July 2022, July 26th, I believe, with a timeline of 30 days to comment on the draft. And it's simply what it did, where we talk about ICT standards, it just added a service subclause to say that IS 17802 shall be the standard in relation to ICT-based products and services. Once this happens, right, assuming it happens today, and you have a deadline of, in relation to ICT, if you look at the deadlines, you have a deadline of 2 years from the date of notification. So if it happens to 2022 3rd December, then 2nd December 2024 is when your deadline gets over. Then there is a scope to litigate. Why I'm talking about litigation here? Because we know that the standards that are kind of already in place are not being followed, right? There is also an obligation upon the government to promote universal design of electronic goods used on day-to-day basis. There is a section in the RPWD Act itself, which is section 43, I believe. And so if you look at all those aspects, so there is strong legal framework to demand accessible products and accessible goods. But when that does not happen, then what are the ways you can kind of make sure that it does happen? One, of course, liaising with the government, talking with the executionary machinery to say, look, this is not happening. Can we go to the Consumer Protection Regulatory Commission and say that they need to come out with something to ensure its implementation? That's one mechanism. Second mechanism that one can use is go to State Commissioner or Chief Commissioner for Persons with Disabilities and say the disability law is not complied, right? The disability law needs to needs to be complied with by the manufacturers of products. Third aspect, which I believe would be more interesting to try and develop further, is the access to consumer protection forums itself. Now, NGOs will not fall under consumer rights organization per se, because their main objectives are not to kind of disability NGOs I'm talking about. Their main objectives are not to litigate for consumer disputes or redress consumer disputes, right? So I firmly believe that unless we have a Consumer Protection Act amendment to cater to the specific requirement, I don't think we can call our existing NGOs as consumer rights organizations per se. But as an individual, if I go and buy a microwave oven or a machine or anything else for that matter, simple things. If I even buy a battery cell, AA, AAA battery cell, and the packaging does not have instructions, or if I buy a medicine and the packaging does not have instructions, I can very well go and kind of litigate on the ground of product defect liability or product liability, and if it's a service, then deficiency of services, because in both places the ground is non-compliance with the law of the land. There is a law which is Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act, and the rules made thereunder, and the rules do talk about certain standards in relation to accessibility. We do need more. Food standards, for example, need to have accessibility notification as to how would you provide food safety instructions in an accessible manner. Telecom Regulatory Authority of India partially kind of spoke about making the bills accessible, etc. But we still don't have comprehensive standards around using the KYC process, the e-KYC process for customers when you talk about availing telephone connections or mobile connections, etc. Similarly, financial services. So goods and services have a very good interlinked interplay, if I may call it, where to be able to avail the services, you need accessibility standards. And once you avail the services, and if there are any goods involved in using those services, then those goods need to be made accessible. So from a framework perspective, we have things right now. It's possible to argue that we have some framework. It's not as strong as one would like it to be, but still there is a good framework that we can build upon. But from implementation perspective, we need to look at both aspects: the disability escalation mechanisms, which is your CCPD, SCPD, etc. And then you talk about consumer rights implementation mechanisms, which is your CCPRA and your consumer forums. These, I believe, and then kind of one of the problems that we're facing right now, for example, Chief Commissioner and State Commissioners do not impose any penalty for non-compliance with the law. In their wisdom, they believe that this penalty power is only given to the special courts, because that the chapter that they fall in is starts with section 82, and then only special courts have the power to give penalty. So they don't believe that they have the power to give penalty, impose penalty. So that's one aspect. Second aspect, going through the ordinary civil litigation is not an ideal situation, because it takes time, etc. And it's a lengthy process. But if we try district or state forums to start with as consumer litigation aspects, that would be one interesting angle to try and see, and also sensitize consumer forum bodies around the need for accessibility, and see. Or the other way could be, for example, I remember recently, many complaints were made to the National Consumer Helpline around problems being faced due to excessive charging by the food delivery apps or excessive charging by the cab aggregators, etc. And CCPRA did take a note of it, and that's how. I mean, of course, there are litigations going around whether the restaurant is entitled to charge service charge additional upon, over and above the or item cost itself. That's a separate aspect, but at least CCPRA did take a note of this issue and did regulate upon it. If persons with disability show that strong demand that yes, we also form a class of society or a section of society that the service providers or product manufacturers need to cater to, and if we file complaints through the National Consumer Helpline and say that these things are not accessible for us, I'm certain that at least if we have a number of complaints being filed there, I'm certain that CCPRA will have to take up some step. So these are some of the ways in which we can kind of achieve accessible consumer market of goods, and also another way to do this, for example, could be that, as I said, there is an obligation upon the government, appropriate government, it says. So appropriate government will be the center and state both, because the problem with disability is that disability as a subject falls under list 3 of the Constitution of India, right? It's under the concurrent list. So both state and central governments are empowered to frame their own legislations. Of course, there is then also the law of or the principle of repugnancy with parliamentary laws. So you can't go beyond what the central government has as such legislated. But to be able to get across this, we also need to be mindful of the states where disability rules have been formulated or disability rules have been adopted as is, which are framed by the central government. And we also need to be mindful of the fact whether the state commissioners are functioning well in the particular state, or the state advisory boards are functioning or not functioning. So I suggest, if we are taking the disability rights route, which is to say we are going the chief commissioner or state commissioner route, then you follow the chief commissioner route. The disposals could happen and again, it's very subjective because we have one matter of income tax where Kanchan ma'am has been litigating for income tax accessibility, and it's more than a year that we tried to convince the fact that the portal is not accessible and the vendor is kind of trying to diverge the attention. And thanks to ma'am's perseverance, that we are able to make them accountable for their negligency, so to speak. So, but I'm saying at least there is a forum which does allow you to get redressal of your grievances, and at least there are hearings happening. But the problem with this entire approach of CCPD and state commissioners is that it's not very effective. It only have persuasive powers, especially against a government authority. Now, I have a very different opinion. Section 76 of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act, which talks about implementation of CCPD's recommendations, that starts with the wording saying that any recommendation passed against a government authority under Section 75. And to my mind, to my reading, the word government authority has only been used in Section 75B. So unless the order is passed pursuant to Section 75B, is when you have a right or you have a ground to reject the recommendations of the CCPD. In my opinion, any recommendation which is issued pursuant to the pure Section 75, a plain Section 75 without making any reference to a specific clause, should be binding. That is what I would like to kind of test and try and see where it stands in a judicial litigation, to make sure that the law is clarified on that aspect. Because many people right now believe that any recommendations passed, any order passed by the CCPD is a recommendation. So with that, I personally feel that to empower consumers and to be able to enjoy accessible marketplace of products, etc., we need to kind of work with the consumer forums and Consumer Protection Regulatory Commission, as opposed to the Disability Commissioner or the disability redressal bodies that are being formed. That I think would have a bigger and broader impact across the businesses that we're trying to change. Thank you so much for having me here. Open for questions, if any.
Audio now unmuted. Menu bar. New button to navigate.
So, Amar sir, will you be here so we can take the questions later? Also?
Sure.
Kanchan ma'am, can you hear us, ma'am? Kanchan ma'am? Kanchan ma'am, can you hear us? Harshit, just check it out whether she is able to unmute or not.
No, sir.
Just give me a second. I just try once again. Okay, just a minute.
Alert. Alert. Caption and Nani has left the meeting.
Hello, ma'am. Samikta, now Kanchan ma'am is online through my phone. Okay, so she will speak.
Okay, sir.
Okay.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Okay. Kanchan ma'am, please over to you, ma'am.
Can you all hear me now? Is that clearer?
Harshit, are you able to hear?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, very much audible, ma'am. Go ahead, ma'am, please.
Very clearly. Okay. I'm so sorry about this. I don't know why I couldn't unmute. So I'm so sorry. And I've been hearing you all throughout. So, well, thank you for inviting me. And yes, Amar has covered a lot of ground with consumer goods. and services go together. So 3 years ago, 2019 June, we were supposed to have all our services accessible and usable by us. But of course, nothing has happened like that. However, we are consumers, so we have rights. And not only do we have rights on 3rd December, but we also have rights on Consumer Day in March, as well as all throughout the year.
I'm sorry. There's
What do we
one.
do?
I'm sorry,
Our biggest
Kanchan ma'am.
service
Hello.
non-provider is
Hello.
the
Go ahead.
judicial system.
Sorry,
And
1
you
minute,
all
Kanchan
are
ma'am.
part of the judicial system, or are going to be very soon.
Marisport sir, you have to
First,
tell
we
Kanchan
have-
ma'am.
Marisport sir will have to convey to ma'am to stop for 1
Correct.
second.
Hi. There is one issue. There are sign language interpreters working in this program. So I think the screen readers are making, I'm so sorry, but this is a challenge for interpreters. There are two sounds here. So Kanchan ma'am and the software is speaking together. Can we help that, please?
So, Melissa, if you can turn on turn on your mic and put the screen reader off. That
Yeah,
will
I
sort
did.
out.
Yeah. Now, Saurav sir, please just hold on. Kanchan ma'am, now he requests you to go slow and just pass wherever it is possible, ma'am. And screen readers, I have make sure already. Okay, that won't be an issue. Yeah, please go ahead, ma'am.
Sorry. Yes. Okay. So I was saying that basically judicial services are the biggest service that we need. And if those are not accessible, then all the other rights that we have as consumers will not be implementable or will be shabbily implementable. I'll start with what Amar said about the income tax portal. We had a complaint last year from a lot of people that the income tax portal, which was accessible, became inaccessible. And this is a problem. At the outset, I must tell you that things which were doable are now becoming undoable. And we have to be very careful about our rights here. The same logic goes for banking. Banking was easy and it was becoming accessible. Suddenly things have gone haywire. One of the things with banking services now is your credit card. When you swipe your credit card, what happens is that today we have machines which don't have digits on them, but they are touchscreen. So how can I use my credit card? The tapping one, the new one that has come, the tapping one is only up to 5,000 rupees. The one that I used to use earlier was with digits, so I could be independent and use my credit card. Today, I cannot use my credit card because most of the machines are, the point of sales machines are screen reader, touch screen. So we have to be careful. And I'll go back to income tax and tell you that income tax, it has taken us a year plus. And the way the resistance is coming in from Infosys, it's amazing. The income tax authorities have thrown up their hands and said, oh, we can't do anything. Our provider is Infosys. Infosys, unfortunately, is not, it's trying its best, but that also with a lot of reluctance, but it hasn't been able to sort it out completely. So here we have a problem. We have a big company, we have a government agency, and we have a bunch of people from the disability sector who are trying their hardest to get done this work. So as a consumer, you have a right and you must exercise your right immediately. The right is that you cannot take deficient goods and services. And deficiency is all around us. Whether you look at ramps, as your first speaker said, your ramps are absolutely inaccessible. So a place like for example, I've been fighting this with the Charity Commissioner's office. There were steps with a railing, so I could walk up that. Now they've gone and put a ramp because I've been telling them it's inaccessible. Now, without thinking, they put a ramp, fine. The ramp is completely inaccessible, and that the railing that I used to hold on to, I can't hold on because the ramp is there in the way. So what was accessible partially has now become inaccessible fully. We have to be careful with what we do. Our as service receivers and service takers, we have right from housing to everything else. When you think about when we go to an organization for the disabled, many of them are, and not all of them, are very unclean. They're very, very dirty. There are cobwebs on the side, the floors are barely swept, and the rooms where they sleep are quite dirty. Now, I know we're not really service receivers there or takers, but honestly, we are getting a service, but yes, it's different from the services under the Consumer Protection Act. We have to think about all these things as well. We cannot just say that, oh, only the government and only the private sector. What about our own sector? Why are we having, horrible services from our own sector? The other problem here is when we look at the banking services, we are moving on. When in 2008, we got the circular from the RBI saying that all services will be made available to the visually impaired, and then all the other disabilities also started getting circulars. We did just sort of few of them. We at that time what was available and a little bit of forward thinking, and we had quite a few at that time. Today, banking services have gone way beyond that. I have an online account. If my statement comes to me in print, which is the print which is not proper, it's too light, like my mom says, it's too light for her since she's an old lady. And what about the other people who say that, even those who can see, who say they are in grades of gray? So it's very difficult to read black on shades of gray. So we have to see that what every service that we now get is imperfect. We have to now try to go for, to sort each one out again. So for you at the college level, I think we need to look at everything one by one and sort it out. But the problem is being constantly alert and constantly aware. Our rights are never our rights unless we make it our right. Services for us include housing. You look at banking, of course, insurance. Now insurance companies have started giving insurance to the disabled at a certain level. However, have we really tested this service as yet? I haven't had any case of people really testing the service saying, I've fallen ill or I'm in hospital and I need my insurance money. I haven't seen that happening as yet, and I'd like to see that happening. Also, what I'm told is that insurance companies are not really giving the disabled insurance properly. They're asking the companies where these disabled people are working to compensate by paying a higher premium or adjusting it in the group insurance programs of the company, which is not nice because we're still treated as second-class citizens and also as, bicharas. So we don't want that to happen, but it is happening, and companies are taking up the differential and paying it, unfortunately. But fortunately for us, yes, it's good. At least we're getting the insurance that we need. So banking, insurance is there. Transportation. We talked about low floor buses. We had this order in 2003 from Bombay High Court, and which has been replicated in Tamil Nadu and Karnataka and a few other states. But the rest of India still doesn't have low floor buses. But the sad thing is, every time to go to the judiciary to get a bus, it's very sad. But that's unfortunately how India works. You go every time to your judiciary. And therefore the judiciary, which is so inaccessible, it's really shocking. One, of course, is the entry into the building of the judiciary, but also the way the services are provided there is shoddy. Accessibility of websites of the judiciary is still very bad, still not fully done. However, slow and surely it's happening. The new things that are coming around, videos with words in them, so we have to extract the wordings. This is an accessibility issue that we're going to have to face. And I don't know, there's so many things that Amar has covered with you, and so many rules and regulations that are going to come about, that we need really to consider what we want to do ahead of us. As a consumer, as a person with disability, we have to keep track of what is not happening in the world. Ramps are coming up everywhere. The inclination of the ramp, horrible, no accessibility standards here. Private builders, etc., are actually following the rules, and the government is actually not following the rules. I would say in about 80% of the cases, I cannot generalize to 100%, but 80% of the cases, private sector is kind of doing it. Toilets, I heard somebody talking about toilets in public sector. No, but even the toilet that is available to others, not to the wheelchair users, but and people with crutches, etc. But even for regular people, look at the size, look at the way they're designed. If there's water, it's a mess. So special toilets for the disabled are a far cry. Yes, however, at the airport, you'll find them. At a few other places, you'll find them all over the place, which is a great, great blessing. So if you can do it at the airport, I'm sure you can do it at an office, and especially offices that have a lot of employees. And when you have 4% of the population of that office as disabled, so you definitely need them. It's not that we don't, we have a reservation, we should be there, and therefore we should have the other services along with it. I've always found that I was low vision before, so I've always found that lighting in the rooms.
Mary sir, you are not audible. Mary sir, Mary sir, Mary sir, Mary Sport sir, Mary Sport sir. Mary Sport sir.
Hello, Kanchan ma'am, can you hear us, ma'am? Ma'am, actually, as an activist, as a consumer, ma'am, could you just share it? How long you come away from that accessible banking services path? Because income tax,
banking we started in 2006.
Yes.
Around 2006.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Please go ahead, ma'am. Hello. Just hold on.
Marisport sir, request you to kindly keep the speaker and the mobile close, because I lost Kanchan ma'am in the middle. I couldn't hear.
Sir,
5 minutes.
yes. Please, ma'am, go ahead, ma'am.
Okay, so from banking, we started around 2006, and there were very many things that happened to reach 2008. Mr. Pincha, a very senior person at that time, filed a case in Assam High Court against banking because he was an employer. He worked for an organization there in Assam, but he was paying salaries, and everybody's salaries were getting credited except his own, which was because he was blind. So they weren't giving him a bank account in Assam in the same bank where his NGO had an account. So that was one. And there was a whole bunch of people complaining at different stages. We also, at Access India, we also took it up very seriously, because every complaint that we got, we forwarded it to the Reserve Bank of India. And the Reserve Bank's chief general manager had to deal with it personally. He had to actually go to speak to every branch that was denying a service. And it could be very funnily, because we had this problem with ICICI Bank. ICICI is just an example, but we had this problem with ICICI, where one branch was allowing you to open an account if you were disabled. The other branch was saying, no, unless you have a joint account, you can't have it. The third branch said something else, no debit card. So we had this happening like across the country. And in fact, in one time, it was ICICI Bank, 2 branches in the same city of Mumbai were not allowing different facilities. So, so as far as I can understand, we started around 2006. We complained. By 2008, they were tired of us. The Reserve Bank was really tired of us because we had like bombarded them. And the idea is that Munabai concept, keep on going at it, So everybody who had a problem, and that is the time when a lot of disabled people were getting jobs. And they needed salaries, and they needed to pay for their EMIs, and they needed to pay for other things. So, and they started getting debit cards, credit cards, understanding how to use them. And so that's when in 2008, we were with the Reserve Bank of India, and they actually sent out a circular saying all facilities and listing out the 10, 11 facilities. After that, the interesting part of it is that everybody interprets everything differently. So, well, we had this one lady, she was allowed an account singly, but not jointly with her father. I mean, just because she was blind, because it was not in that circular. So we've had these funny situations. Lockers were not being allowed, but lockers got allowed. So we have moved from 2008. A lot of things changed. However, with time, we've had to go for further facilities. And today we find a lot of banking services not accessible. And this is not, they're not still not accessible because they had become accessible, but because technology changed. For example, our notes were perfectly fine before Demon, where we had the old notes, which are different sizes and shapes and colors. And for uneducated people, illiterate people, the coloring was the most important thing. And the sizes mattered for older people who could actually, feel it, touch it, and make out which note it was. We have gone to an inaccessible format of having notes which are the same length, the same width, but a different length. But the length is so minuscule. The difference between 2 notes is so little that it's very difficult to distinguish the two. So we have come from sometimes from accessibility to inaccessibility. I can't say that we haven't gone far, but we've gone sometimes backwards. So 1 step forward, 2 steps backwards, sometimes 3 steps forward, 4 steps backwards. Who knows? We are just, every day we have a problem, we face it, we try to deal with it. For y'all, the best thing is to keep track of the history as well as keep track of what is happening just now. Because we have to deal with today's problems. I can't use my credit card, but I can use Google Pay. Why can't I use Paytm? It's an Indian one. Why should I use Google Pay, which is foreign? Because Paytm is not accessible and doesn't want to become accessible. The worst thing is that. And Paytm has really, really been a nuisance of so difficult to deal with them. We've tried so hard. We've fought with them. We've cajoled them. We've, requested them. We've tried everything. They just don't understand. So I'm just happy that the price has gone down of their shares. I'm just being mean and about it, but I'm just so happy that they're not doing well because they're not being nice to us. So as a service user, I need services. Today, my life is different from what a person with blindness would have been 50 years ago or even 10 years ago. We have come a long way from that. Today, when Wankhede Stadium, one of the biggest stadiums of India, the cricket stadium, had Sachin Tendulkar's final match, he put up a ramp for his mother to come in and watch that match. But Wankhede Stadium does not have the ramp anymore, unless somebody can tell me differently, but it doesn't have the ramp. It was only there for his mother. It was only there for his mother, So it is very sad that these are the things that we, it can be done for somebody, but not for everybody. Years ago, Stephen Hawking had come to India and he was very miserable in Bombay. And in Bombay, because it was not accessible, he was stuck in his hotel room and he complained about it at that time. And that's how Javed Abadi and the rest of them fought in Delhi and got Qutub Minar and the Red Fort accessible. And then the Archaeological Survey and etc. were very keen on removing the ramps. And again, there had to be dharna to say, no, don't remove our ramps. Now that you've given us ramps, please keep the ramps there. So for special people, special things happen in this country. But we have to be very careful that we also are special and we must keep our rights. So whether we call Divyang or disabled or whatever we are called, we are service users. Today, I pay for my services, so I want my services. I was in Benares last week, and everyone said it's become very accessible, etc. It was quite, one part of it was nice, but a lot of it was not. It was so difficult to jump down steps and high rocks, which you can't change those rocks, but you can put in a bamboo on the side as a railing, but that too not done. And it is difficult to do in retrospect. However, modern things are being built inaccessible, and old things which were a little accessible have become inaccessible because of the barricading or the police, etc., etc. So somewhere y'all as a group need to look at this as a whole. So banking has come a long way, Maris, a long way.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Because it's a kind of heartening moment to note, especially with regard to consumerism and disability in India, that banking services is the one actually paved the path. Other services, there is no voice actually. Now only we have that technological advancement. So banking services is a very, very vital thing, ma'am, which you and others have been part of that. So I'm glad to have you on board. And especially, ma'am, when you feel, ma'am, how was your opinion, ma'am? Because you won't be there for question and answer also. So that's why, ma'am, I would like to know from your perspective as an individual, because even we are fighting, but as an individual, whether we have been given on the slot or how, whether we have to fight always, because that's also I would like to know, ma'am, from your perspective. Have you got instantly your account to open, ma'am, or something happened like activism things you did?
So for me, I had an account
Yes.
earlier before I became blind.
Okay.
So I've been holding an account before I was even a major. I used to put in my 10 rupees and 20 rupees and 50 rupees at that time. Whatever I could save, I used to put into the bank. So I had a service and I had my debit card and credit card. But Maris, for me, Access India has been one place where I have got a lot of stability, because I was losing sight. I did not know how to deal with my loss of sight, because I didn't have any blind friends before. Now I have a lot, but so I turned to Access India to get answers from a lot of things, and then I saw a lot of complaints, and I now react when there are a lot of complaints. I say, I can do it. Let me try. Why should I be the privileged one to have everything? Why not the others? And the others need it now, because in 2006, I told you, everybody was started getting jobs. So the ones who were educated started getting jobs. IBM opened up. The whole technology sector opened up. Banking was open also, but you can't put your money in your account, and Mr. Pincha can't even draw his own salary. So it was a ridiculous situation. It was, paisa hai, but paisa kya karega paisa, So anyway, so that is how, and I was lucky at that time because I knew the deputy governor of the Reserve Bank, and she was very good. She understood. I explained to her that I pay council fees of more than ₹1 lakh per time, and I'm not going to come to the bank and take out cash and go and pay council fees and 1 lakh. You have to give me a bodyguard then if I'm to carry cash from. You can't let me use a check. You can't let me do online transactions. What nonsense. That's how it happened. So slowly, you find where the shoe pinches. That is the person who will get up and scream. But you have to do it. Let me tell you a little story. I had worked with NSDL, that is National Securities Depositories, before RBI. And what happened was, at that time, I was selling some shares, and they were not allowing me to sell because my signature wasn't tallying, etc. And there was a silly circular that you had to get the person who had opened the account, who was available at that time, who had to go with you for signing. And we luckily found a connect to the chairman at that time. And we got the circular changed, and it took me about 3-4 weeks to write the note out. However, the NSDL office actually issued the circular within 2 weeks. All those restrictions were reduced and removed, actually. Along the way came Amar, and he found that CDSL didn't have a similar circular. So he developed it into CDSL. Then we had to get the trading account done. And, so from one thing, it develops to the other. Banking has helped all the disabled. After the blind, it was all the other disabled also who have been able to open accounts, etc. For us, NSDL to CDSL to NHB, the National Housing Bank. So it has been a ride. Everything develops. We stand on the shoulders of our forefathers and go ahead.
Yes, ma'am.
because there's education, we are able to now go further. Law colleges have opened up. Law is very easy to study for all of us. You know, it's all the books are available online, etc. Practice of law is a difficult thing.
Yes. Yeah.
However, there are many reasons for it. One, some of them being practical reasons for everybody. Courts take time, and you don't get paid accordingly then. So you have to be very careful on that. Big law firms have glass ceilings. Let's be honest about it. You rise to the glass ceiling, you get a good salary, you'll get a reasonable designation. But beyond that, you have to really strive to go beyond that. The glass ceiling is there. And let's not for individuals like me and others who have their own practices, networking is the key. I need clients. How will I get my money otherwise? If I don't have a client, I'm not going to make it. Okay. And that's simple about it. So we have our own challenges. Yes. Also, when you have your own practice, you can't have too many people working with you, in which case, but you can make the person do a lot of reading, which otherwise big law firms won't give you an assistant, unfortunately, which they should, because it's called reasonable accommodation. Here again, Maris, I'll tell you about a small story from Bombay. We had two solicitors who were blind when they were very young. And they were born blind. And they studied and they both wanted to become lawyers. So they went to a big law firm called Mullah & Mullah. And Mullah & Mullah allowed, in those days, one of the biggest law firms in Bombay and maybe India. I'm talking about at least 15, 20 years before me. Means they must be in their 70s now. Okay. They were allowed assistant to read to them. Both of them had an individual assistant each, and they were allowed to have that assistant sitting there next to them and who read to them throughout the year. And things happened, and that's how they both passed the solicitors. One went to Tata's and now he's no more, he's passed on. And the other gentleman has a very good practice in maritime law. And he specialized in it. That's the good thing about specialization again, is that you have a particular line and you read more and more in one sector and don't go all over the place like me. But this gentleman, Deepak, he's still practicing. He has a good practice. He's very well respected in the Bombay High Court. He advises on maritime law. And he basically started with Braille, only Braille. He only knew Braille. And in those days, there was no computers, etc. And so he had to have people reading hard copies. Today, he has learned computers. He reads online. He reads from the computer and is able to do a lot of his work also again on his own now. But what was accessible at that time, a reasonable accommodation at that time of the junior sitting next to them and reading to them, is now gone. No law firm will allow you a junior today to sit next to you. And junior as in a non-legal person, like a para or a absolutely non-legal person to sit next to you. Oh, client confidentiality, Okay. So something accessible has become inaccessible now. So we have to now depend on ourselves only, most of the time. Okay. So I hope I've covered a little bit of what you want to know.
Sure, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thanks a lot, ma'am. And I think we may not have you in a longer period because you won't, as well as due to technological glitch, you won't be available online. So sorry for that, ma'am. And hope to have you in another event, ma'am. Thanks a lot for spending time with us, ma'am.
Yes. Is there anybody else who wants to ask a question? I'm still here. So is there anybody else?
I'm just asking, ma'am, because I have to convey to you, because directly you won't hear the audio. Harshit, is there? You can hear audio, right? Harshit, if there is any questions, please ask. 1 or 2 questions.
Sure, sir. We have one question. I'll just take it. Ma'am, do we need any amendments in disability law and consumer laws for inclusion of PWDs, or is it the mindset that only requires a change? Mary, sir, if you can convey.
Yeah, Consumer, can you are you able to hear that question?
No, sorry.
Ma'am,
what was the question?
Ma'am, actually, there is a question with regard to whether we required any amendment in the RPWD or Consumer Act so that we can ensure the accessible and availability of consumer markets and services.
No, I don't think we need we don't need amendment at all. We need to enforce what we have. Okay, and the judges are allowed to read a little around the law, but accessibility is a part of RPWD Act, so we don't really need an amendment. And consumers talk about deficient service, so anything which is not accessible can be considered as deficient. Now, if you keep asking for amendment, there will be a lot of problem with Parliament again. But if you at this stage just go and enforce your rights, it will be much better. Keep testing the judiciary. The judiciary will perform. Test the best remedy for us is the company or the provider. Most of them do not want bad publicity. And I have found that online writing to their websites, writing to the chairman does, to some extent, reduce the problem. So we very often get results just by simply writing and making a noise about it. The courts is the second option. The third is, of course, the press. Press doesn't carry often too much because press doesn't want to upset big companies, etc. But they do write. It's not that they don't. I don't think you need a law change. The law will change on its own. You know, as and when we keep implementing, just like we did for banking, how we harassed the Reserve Bank, we kept sending them complaints. So you keep filing complaints and the law will automatically become what you want it to be. But please understand, it is not static. Today's problem is not tomorrow's problem. Today's problem is today's problem. Tomorrow will be new problems.
Sure. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, ma'am. Thanks for coming, ma'am.
So sorry about this technical.
No, it will not possible. Thanks a lot, ma'am.
Sorry.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, Amarjin sir, we will also come to you for your experience with regard to the other share market and other consumer activism after Vivers talk. Please, you also please share that one, sir, after Vivers speech.
Sure.
Yes. Samita, over to you.
Yes, sir. Next speaker for the day is Mr. Vaibhav Kotadi, founder and CEO, Whom Why You Belong. Mr. Vaibhav Kotadi is an experienced and a strong professional with a Master of Business Administration, MBA, focused in management from University of Denver, Daniels College of Business, Technological Entrepreneurship from Northeastern University, and Industrial and System Engineering from Rochester Institute of Technology, Rochester, New York. He is fluent in American Sign Language. He has founded and is currently managing www.omby.com, an e-commerce store that sells healing gemstones, accessories, and pashmina shawls. He also hosts the Mumbai Talk Show, where he interviews with different leaders, professionals, and celebrities. He looks after investment activities in real estate, storage units, and startup enterprises for Om International LLC that he founded in 2010. Mr. Vaibhav is open to all opportunities, including business, investment, consulting, and employment opportunities. We're very happy to have you here, sir. Sir will be addressing us on accessible market from seller's perspective. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me involved here. And I'm really, really happy to be here, and also happy International Day of Persons with Disability to all of you. I am an engineer, a deaf engineer, and today is a very important day to tell people about what we need, and would like to thank Gujarat National Law University, all the academics, all the professors, all the students, all the esteemed panelists who are taking so much time to share their experiences and their aspirations to make India the way we want day by day. So waving hands and cheers and applause for all of you present here. So yes, consumer rights and consumerism So 1.5 years ago, 1.5 years ago, I started OMY. It was not easy. It was a difficult start, but as I continued, things started getting better. So the Pashmina shawls, as you said, that there is one person I met, is a person with disability, he's a wheelchair user. He's so nice. He stitches so well, his designs, his artwork, his skills. The only thing missing was he had everything, but he didn't have the network to sell his product. So this is from Kashmir, right? The state has a lot of issues. The person himself did belong to a very meager income family. He was a wheelchair user. And I wanted to support this person because of the skill he had. So we partnered. He basically, I'm trying to get employment. I mean, he already has the skill. And I, want to ensure that his products go out in the market. Then I met a jeweler, and this woman is from Jaipur, and this woman has a kind of mental condition, but she does jewelry work. And I was like, why not? Can you work with us? She's like, yeah, why not? All the models on OMY, the photos which you see, or the magazines which you see, all the models who are, carrying the Pashmina shawls, the jewelry, all of them, almost 89 to 90% of them are deaf. And they want to be in this career. I want to give them opportunities. It's very important to also see role models. So it's important to have role models in our community. For example, law professors, you're talking about accessibility, the law. At the same time, we also have to think about people with disabilities and having their lived experiences, their thoughts, their opinions, their recommendations and suggestions as part of any kind of policies. The member of parliament, there's no person with disability within our parliament. Zero. If even there was one person with disability as a member of parliament, that person can actually speak for us, take our things forward. So it has to be, we have to work together to take our aspirations and our aims forward. But why not have a member of parliament as a person with disability who's an expert, who can actually talk more about our community, at least bringing those perspectives in the parliament, which can make more space for more constructive discussions. And of course, I'm an entrepreneur, I will talk about entrepreneurship opportunities for persons with disability, different kind of support, maybe financial support for persons with disability. As mentioned, I support startups, and I would love to do startups with persons with disability. Now, our first panelist mentioned the museums and the monuments are cheaper. The tickets are cheaper for persons with disability. Do you know why? Because all places with disability, all places like museums or exhibition galleries do not provide that kind of equal access, equality for persons with disability. We have to spend a lot for meeting and coming there, and to compensate, maybe those tickets are cheaper. And here in India, I would say the situation is getting better. I would say 10 years back to see now, India has made a lot of changes. First of all, Indian Sign Language has been recognized. There's more and more talk about having more Indian Sign Language interpreters at public interaction centers. There are more and more entrepreneurs, deaf entrepreneurs who are coming into the limelight, want to set up their own businesses. I also want to emphasize about something which we in our community call deaf gain. And, why not call it disability gain? Deaf gain and disability gain. Why do we call it gain? Let me tell you, the person who started SMS service, text messaging, it was long way back, long time back, but it was developed certifically because the person was hard of hearing, and he developed this. But SMS services are used by the whole world, right? Texting messages. Can you imagine that was one person? And can you talk with me without an interpreter? So if there were no interpreters in the past to talk to a deaf person, the main thing was text messaging. And this deaf person, the hard of hearing person, made it. And that's being used by the whole world. Now, closed captions. Captions have been developed for deaf people, keeping them in mind, but it's used. It's gain. It's a gain. It's a benefit for all people, not just people with disabilities. Even internet. The father of internet himself, Vint Cerf, it was hard of hearing. He was working in a company, but it was very difficult for him to work with everyone else because nobody knew his language. And he, because of these issues, he wanted to share documents with his associates. Instead of talking on phone, the first IP network was developed by him, which is now Internet for All. And we all go to the mall very regularly, right? We go to stores. There are a lot of people. I'm sure there's a lot of crowd. Imagine if there is an alarm, if there is a light alarm, the visual alarms, especially, when they are placed in various situations or various places, are specifically for persons with disability, especially deaf people, but it helps everyone. So accessibility is not just for persons with disability. Yes, you start it for keeping persons with disability in mind, but it becomes useful for everyone in the world. So many people in the whole wide world is using all these services which were specifically made for deaf people or disabled people, persons with disability. Just imagine if there was no text service or video calling services or internet. Imagine your life without these services. So that is why it's very, very important to appreciate, acknowledge, and keep disabled people in the center when you're designing anything about us. They know, they understand, we understand what we need. And these things don't just benefit us, it benefits everyone. Also, hospitals. Hospitals are in need of awareness related to communication with persons with disability, any kind of reasonable accommodation required. There's so much of counseling where persons with disability also should deserve equal opportunities in healthcare. These are the needs. Sports, football, for example. How do people communicate? Do you see they're so far away. They use a lot of gestures and sign languages. They use stop, they show one, go here, go there. So you see how this is gain coming from the person, from the community, from the disabled community, but is being used by everyone. So going back to deaf gain, it is basically a benefit which this community and their unique perspectives and experiences provide, which is a huge benefit for the entire world. For educational institutions, schools, colleges, we have to understand that if you want to make accessible, your campuses, if you're accessible, if your lectures, your classrooms are accessible, you will see more persons with disability in the front. They'll apply for their courses. There are millions of persons with disability who are ignored. There are a lot of people, who have invisible disabilities. I mean, you can see, but not see that the person is disabled, but they have some kind of disability which requires all institutes, schools and colleges to become more and more accessible, to understand how the infrastructure and access has a lot of different aspects, right? And imagine with good education, we'll have good business, we'll have good consumer practices, there'll be more entrepreneurs, and this will help develop the market. This will help develop, you will also understand more about the needs and the various kinds of access needs. People with blindness or low vision, the community, they use alt text, where the photos or anything visual is described, or there are also image descriptions. It's very useful for persons with blindness and low vision. But at the same time, do you think hearing people or persons without disability do not benefit from these kind of descriptions? They do. So alt text, it basically should become, it is a need. It's a part of, the development for everyone. Everyone uses and benefits from that. The future, a lot of people are already talking about metaverse, the MV. Metaverse is the technology of the future. Will it be accessible? Will there be a separate group which ensures that they develop the technologies, thinking about how it applies to persons with disability, to ensure that they develop and also take care of the needs of persons with disability in business and entrepreneurs? For companies like Zomato, all different companies, they have now also an SMS or a text service for consumers, which is really nice for persons with, especially deaf people. We don't need to call, because that's the norm, right? You always call. But as a person with deafness, I need to communicate with people, but I do it on text. So there's a lot of trial, there's a lot of training required, a lot of awareness required, especially related to communication access. And you see how even hearing people are more comfortable with text and SMS instead of calls, right? It's easier. It's more personal, it's comfortable. 90%, there's a research which proves that 90% of people in USA prefer to use text messages instead of calls. So imagine how useful is text messaging services. And it's just the same in US too, because India also in the future, there'll be a lot of people who will mobile, who will be tech savvy. They want to use internet, they want to use messages. They're also entrepreneurs as persons with disabilities. So deaf and other persons with disability and other communities, we have to understand that whatever you're developing, it's not just for us. Any kind of solution benefits the larger world and everybody. So I want to emphasize again that it is disabled gain. Whatever you're developing, keep in mind, health services, counseling services, business services, whenever there is any kind of accessibility added, reasonable accommodation added, and you develop this, keeping in mind persons with disability, the entire world benefits. Again, I would like to specify deaf gain and disabled gain is very, very important. We must keep this in mind, and it applies to everyone. It applies to entrepreneurs, trainers, of course, the government sector, educational sector, and the private and the service sector. Consumers, deserve to have a better experience, and they expect improvement in services. And hopefully the startup business also, with various kind of developments, there would be an influx of persons with disability having more startup. And there are a lot of people, I'm so proud to be working with a lot of people with disabilities who are making a lot of products for my company as well as the whole wide world, and want to see this as one big community of connected people who are fighting, who are making the place more accessible. So one more thing is all the airports, there is no sound, right? There's no, that's a recent norm. There will be no audio announcements. They directly text your phones about any delay, messages, whatever it is, correct? Right? That's how it takes, so there's a lot of benefit. Everybody benefits from these kind of services. Infrastructural accessibility needs to be improved. I see a lot of amazing changes and developments, and we are only getting better and better. And this needs to continue. And we have to remember that we are a big team. We work together. We work for the improvement of the system. We work towards the improved development, empowering our friends and colleagues, and hope that India, just kickstarts the development process, and the government also listens and expedites these things which we need. But the most important thing is we need more visibility. Persons with disability, with strong voices, we don't see many of them in the sector. We need more persons with disability having a strong voice in the main arenas, talking about us, talking about our issues. It could be deaf people, persons with disability, persons who are blind, persons with low vision. We need to develop stronger role models who are out there voicing for us. Again, my last line and my last message to all of you would be: deaf gain and disabled gain will make sure there is more access for people everywhere and all people. Yeah, that's all. From my side, again, I would like to thank all of you. I hope I was able to do justice. There is a lot of gain in working with us. I'm really happy to any recommendations, any questions, which I'll be happy to answer.
Yes, thank you, Vaibhav. And Shamita, before getting into the question and answer, I request Amarjit sir to come in. Sir, we would like to know your pathway, sir, as an individual consumer, especially if you want to if you would like to open a bank account, or if you would like to open a demat account or something, how much you faced and how much you encountered the challenge, because that is interesting to know. And even Vaibhav sir, you also share as an individual consumer how you faced. I will come to you later.
Sure, sir. So see, my first interaction happened with my bank account, because when I was in my college, I got a scholarship check and I needed to open a bank account, because by then I had no bank account on my name. I went to my nearest branch near to my law college in Bombay, Churchgate, which was SBI. And they said, we can't provide you a bank account because you are blind. So I did not know anything about the RBI circular back then. It was 2008. I just took admission in law, everything. And I figured out, okay, there's RBI circular, etc. I went again to the branch and said, this is the circular. This is where RBI allows. Branch manager says, give us 3 days to check and come back after 3 days. We'll let you know what the possession is. 3 days later, I go. By then, I had figured out contacts in SBI. I had got the branch manager to speak with somebody and a senior in the chairman desk, and he understood that they need to provide me the facility. Right? They provided me bank account, and my ATM card was dispatched by the central processing unit, and the PIN number those days used to come to the branch. Next time when I went to take the PIN number to the branch, the clerk says, who gave you debit card? You are not entitled to use debit card because of your blindness. What if some fraud happens? We can't issue you the PIN number. I said, go and speak to your branch manager. The branch manager shouted at her, saying that if you want to deny it to him, you give it to him in writing, or you deal with it. I am not taking responsibility. She gave me the PIN number. Same problem, Demat account. I got NSDL, CDSL circulars. By then I knew that whatever I have to do, I need to have some policy to show to these guys that there is an entitlement you can't deny, right? So I had my CDSL, NSDL circulars. I went to open the Demat account. They opened my Demat account. Now they say that, okay, for Demat, you have the circular. For trading, you don't have a circular. So we can't open your trading account. Now it's pointless to have a Demat account without having the trading account. So then we got the circular issued for trading account. 2015, when I was working with Trilegal and as an associate, I wanted to avail a housing loan. There was no circular. I applied. The housing loan company did not move my application for 28 days, despite me having to reach out to their compliance officer, despite me having to reach out to their chief credit officer, and all of them on call saying, no, we don't want to discriminate. We'll be very forthcoming. Looking forward to get you, your dream of your home of your dreams, etc. All sweet talks. Nobody is responding to my email. No response on email. 28 days later, I had to write to NHB saying that, this is what the problem is. Can you issue a circular? Thankfully, we got a very sensible managing director, Mr. Sriram Kalyan Raman then. And he kind of agreed and understood the problem, and we got the circular issued. What I'm trying to establish here, the biggest battle, somebody asked also in the chat box, what is the biggest challenge for a person with disability? I think the biggest challenge and biggest battle that persons with disability continue to face is the attitudinal discrimination, the lack of awareness, the lack of sensitization, the lack of sensitivity, the lack of thought process of considering persons with disabilities part of the same society that we are part of. I think that needs to change. And when we are able to change that, I think a lot of these difficulties will get solved. What do you say?
Yes, Amar sir. Thank you for sharing that, because as an individual, even for able to consumer, also the same thing. And especially, sir, I would like to know the marking and other things, because generally the unfair trade practices they used to follow with regard to highlighting the big good things in the big letters, small things in the lesser font. Even they won't take the things ahead. So that kind of deceitness there. As far as disabilities are there, it is more wider. Even if they're putting marks also, we don't able to find, especially visually impaired as well as some cognitive disabilities. Right? In such cases, what we have to do? Do we have some special circulars in line with accessibility circular like ICT, or something else we need to get in?
So if you look at, you're asking about how to standardize, for example, packaging, etc.
Yes.
So packaging, etc. You need to think. One problem that I want to specifically call out here that we should stay away from. When we think of disability, don't think of special facilities. Don't think of, we are catering to people with blindness. Let's give them Braille ATM. Many people don't know Braille despite being blind. Right? Or you rightly said, some people may have cognitive challenges. When we are thinking of speech and hearing impaired people, let's just give them a text. Many people with speech and hearing impairment even today find access to basic education itself as a challenge. Many times you see even the 12th board pattern exams that they have that they have to appear for are still multiple choice question based exams, because the content is not designed in a way which they can access easily, right? And then we expect them to perform at par with others. So think of universal solutions. Now, to give you in this context, for example, QR code could be a very good solution where the same information can be given. If you have a QR code direction that on every packet, on the left of the packet on top, you will have a QR code, and there will be a little embossing or tactile feature to just indicate that there is a QR code. The person can easily point his phone to the QR code, and you can get the same information on screen in form of a text that even a person with visual impairment can read, or even a person with hearing impairment can read, or even a person who's a senior citizen and is not able to see small fonts can read, right? So think of universal solutions.
Yes. Thank you, sir, Amar sir. Now I'm going to Vaibhav sir. I'm asking the same questions. As an individual consumer, how you have dealt with these kind of issues? Of course, account opening may not be the issue, but dealing with the people, that communications and other issues you might have faced, and how you have overcome that, sir.
I understand the problem we are talking about, and it is a very, very common issue. It's a very common experience with banks. It's a very painful experience when we go to banks communicating with them, because none of them are trained appropriately. As you said, writing might not be the preferred method, and they're scared that they'll be blamed. They don't want to lose any money. They don't want to get into any issue. Now, this communication issue, they, of course, can't deny any service to you, because if they do, they are wrong. How do we address the situation? Are there any solutions? What you can do is say that I want to talk to your senior, I want to talk to your manager. If we do not, get any help, the second thing is that we could call a lawyer. We can tell them our legal rights, and there's a lawyer with us, or there's a family support. And that this is a very good opportunity for them to learn from you. And also, because there's always a first time for everybody. For me personally, I will not be able to comment on the experiences of people with blindness and low vision, but I'm really sure that your experiences are not great. And for the right practices to approach the banking system, I would suggest there are more blind or low vision experts who you ask related to solutions related to this. Also, the technical solutions are not 100%. The technology outside, maybe just 40 or 50% of it is useful, accessible, and usable. But yes, there's a lot of work being doing. My cousin himself is blind, and she is a lawyer. She is a lawyer, and she is also a professor at Jindal University. And she's a professor, she's blind, and she tells me that there's so many struggles working individually. And she uses the, law a lot. She's very well read. And she told me that, the needs of the blind and the low vision community and for the deaf and hard of hearing community are not the same. They're very different, because the solution for persons living with blindness or low vision, they can still go and communicate with spoken language. So, what she does, she scans the content and then has a voice speaking out all of that information to her. We also have Google Lens. You can just take your lens, your camera, and the Google, Google can give you a lot of information, turn it into voice, what you're looking at. So these kind of needs where visual text is changed into audio. But the kind of experiences shared by Amar sir and the other people, this is completely not acceptable. Your stories have to be made public. People need to know about these stories. People need to understand what persons with blindness and low vision are facing, especially with the banking system. Hopefully, we have a lot of lawyers and law students here, especially because this is a law university. We also need friends from the press, where we can ensure that there are more testimonials and these experiences going out in the bank, so that the banking system understands the basic thing, that is communication. And yes, you're right, not many deaf people are getting good education. That is why the literacy skills are very minimal. So interpreters, yes, sign language interpreters, but bank will not provide sign language interpreters in India, at least. And there are also confidentiality issues. So you would see that the challenges might be very similar for the blind and the low vision community and the deaf community, but the needs are different. So I believe that these stories have to be published. Please share your stories. Please let other people learn from your experiences. Let other people, there are millions of people who read these stories and get inspired and may be able to help you out in the future. And I hope that I was able to answer the question.
Yeah, thank you, Vaibhav sir.
I'm
Thank
sorry
you.
because I am not blind, or I don't have
No.
I will not having these kind of experiences specifically related to the blind or the low vision people. So
Thank you, sir. Thank you. And you have given depth perspective also. It would be helpful for us. Now, over to you, Samita.
Yes, sir. We've got a few questions from our audience. The first question is whether the existing communication methods implemented on goods and services are accessible, and how to make it more accessible.
Who is going to answer? Amar sir or Vaibhav? Vaibhav sir, who is going to answer? Amar sir? I think Amar.
Sure.
sorry, can the question be?
Just can you repeat? Yeah, can you please repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. Whether the existing communication methods implemented on goods and services are accessible, and how to make it more accessible.
So, well, I think, to be honest, Weber would be the best person to answer this question, but I'll just share my perspective on it because I know the ICT guidelines, etc., the way they are designed. If you see right now how the communication is happening, communication is either happening through audio video without subtitling, right, which makes it inaccessible for persons with speech and hearing impairment. Communication is happening, a lot of communication in our day-to-day life when we deal with apps or deliveries, service providers, etc., is happening on calls. Webhoff spoke about it. For example, if you order a food from Zomato, Swiggy, delivery partner calls you right away. There is no mechanism where you should have the right to specify your preference of communication, that I want text chat instead of calls, right? Without even disclosing too much to the delivery partner that a person with speech and hearing impairment is likely to receive your service, how can you make it universally accessible? So there is that absence. Communication is also happening. For example, if I talk about blindness again, then social media communication is happening through photos, etc. A lot of photos, videos, which have no accessible content. So there are practices that are there. If you follow accessibility standards, okay. If you follow accessible practices, then communication can be designed accessibly. But whether it is happening today, I don't think it's happening. It needs to be improved. That's my perspective. But I'll let Weber take lead on this question.
Okay. Thank you, Amar. And thank you for the question. Communication services related to goods and services. So, of course, no, not fully accessible. Why? Because for deaf and hard of hearing, what kind of access is required specifically when it comes to goods and services may not be notified. What kind of requirements, for example, all texts, whatever kind of texts are coming in, whatever kind of information is coming in, we need more access in it. Let me give you an example. For example, Amazon. If Amazon do you think Amazon has a very strong policy on accessible communication? Maybe textile, whatever I want to order from Myntra or any of these kind of e-commerce, I tell them that you have to text me. I am deaf. I can't, voice call is not my way. So I have to let my mom talk. But this is completely inappropriate. If there was an order, there was an official order that all e-commerce, kind of associations or organizations or entities have to ensure persons with disability are provide preferred communication. So we have to work together. We have to develop certain kind of guidelines for companies to understand what kind of preferences do people with disabilities have. If there is a policy, if there is, of course, text makes it easier. And if there are policies, we can use that as a precedent and get into training, get into awareness. And these things help, once people understand that accessibility helps all and it's benefit for all, it kind of sticks. It's a very good question. And it's very important aspect. We have to make whatever kind of laws, whatever kind of, for example, consumer law, goods and service law, we have to have accessible communication policy in that law, taking care of persons with disability, whether a person blind with low vision or persons with deafness or hard of hearing, especially a paragraph related to accessible communication or preferred communication. For example, persons who are wheelchair users, they should not be made to go down. The services should be delivered to that person, or they should be on a floor where they don't, have to deal with that kind of an issue. So Amazon and Swiggy, Zomato, all these services, they need to ensure that if there's a person with disabilities or wheelchair user, they need to come to the door. So every company or every law needs to have an accessibility policy or a paragraph on access for persons with disability in that law. So hope I've answered that question.
Thank you so much, sir. We have a last question for the day. That is there any policy or law which binds facilitator to make reasonable accommodation, either in Indian or international level?
I'm happy to take up this question. Under the Rights of Persons with Disabilities rules, Rule 3 specifically provides that, if it's especially in relation to employees in general, that reasonable accommodations ought to be provided to every employee with disability, and no employer can ask for the cost of it. That is restricted to the employees. However, judicially, in couple of judgments like Vikas Kumar versus Union of India and others, Supreme Court has held that reasonable accommodation is a right, and it's recognized as a right under Section 3. While the rule is limited to employment, but Section 3 of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act recognizes reasonable accommodation as a right, which every person is entitled to, along with non-discrimination. The only difference here is reasonable accommodation is basically case-by-case specific measures. It's not, reasonable accommodation is not universal design. It can't be said that what you provide to me as a reasonable accommodation will be reasonable accommodation for Weber as well, or even within same disability would be a reasonable accommodation for anybody else for that matter. So reasonable accommodation is person to person specific. Measures differ even within the same disability. But as far as law is concerned, there is an entitlement under Section 3, which is forming part of the Chapter 2, which deals with rights. So reasonable accommodation is very much a right of person with disability. But I think we still need to come up with policy of implementation of reasonable accommodation. Reasonable accommodations in educational institutions, reasonable accommodation in workplace, reasonable accommodations across the public dealings, whether it is public facilities and services, public buildings. We still need to have a policy on that.
Thank you, Amar sir and Vaibhav sir, for taking up the questions. Samita, over to you for the concluding. In fact, I would like to highlight one thing. when I heard you both of you, Samyukta, just give me a minute. Especially with regard to consumers, many of the scholars in legal parlance, they used to quote Mahatma Gandhi's quotations. Consumer is a part of your business entity, and he has given the opportunity to serve. I would like to modify a little bit. Disabled consumer is part of your business entity. It's not about number game. Even persons with disabilities have given the opportunity to serve them, and they are the owner. They are the part of business entity. If every consumer goods and service providers believed in this, because if they target this group, they can target everyone. But if they target only majority, they will lose very, very vital market. Even if the people become older, they will lose the current consumers, because current consumers become older. They have one or other disabilities. So I feel that the Mahatma Gandhi statement, we have to remodify. In fact, all the business entities supposed to believe persons with disabilities are part of the business entities, and PWDs have given the opportunities to serve, and business entities should take this as a wonderful opportunity to devise a mechanism and have a plan for making their goods and services accessible. I think that would be really grateful once they have that empathy, right? With this, I actually conclude this webinar, and I thank everyone. Over to you, Shamita.
The session will end with a note of thanks from Mr. Harshad Goel, sir.
Thank you, Samyukta. On this occasion of International Day of Persons with Disability, I take this opportunity to thank our all distinguished speakers, Professor Maheshwar Singh, Vaibhav Kothari sir, Amarjan sir, Advocate Kanchan Pamnani, for taking out time from their busy schedule and addressing us on this issue of consumerism and the rights of persons with disability. On this occasion, I would like to thank our Director, Professor S. Shanta Kumar, and our Registrar, Dr. Jagdish Chandra TG, for constantly guiding us and supporting us in all our events. I would like to also thank Dr. Anjani Singh Tomar, Head Academic Affairs, and Dr. Viral Pandya, for Head Research and Development Cell of GNLU, for constantly supporting our events. I would like to take this opportunity to mention our faculty members, all the faculty members and the IT staff, admin staff, for helping us out in all the possible manners. At last but not the least, I would like to thank all the participants for joining us on this Saturday morning to listen to the aspects of consumerism and the disabilities. Thank you all. Bye-bye. Over to you, Samyukta. We can continue. Thank you, Vaibhav sir. Thank you. I would also like to thank our sign interpreters, Saurav sir and Preeti ma'am, for constantly doing the interpretation for everyone.
Thank you so much, sir. The feedback form is live. It will be open for the next 10 minutes. I kindly request you all to fill it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone, for inviting and hearing us patiently.
Yeah, thank you, Amar. Thank you, Vaibhav. And Preeti ma'am, thanks. And Saurav, thank you always. And Harshit, thank you for your constant support. Samyukta, to you. And hope to see you all and have you all in another event. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Sir, hope next time physical.
Sure. We will sure, sir. Surely we will have.
Amarjan, for sure, we would plan it offline event. Also, sir, I would like to mention that I am also alumni of Government Law College, Mumbai.
Oh, wow. Lovely.
Okay, sir.
Right.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Harshit, you may end the meeting.
Vaibhav sir is also saying thanks to everyone.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Step 4. End meeting. Leave meeting. Zoom meeting. Tab. Give feedback. Check office. Shift tab. Leave.